When my dad's business collapsed, my parents announced they couldn't afford to raise two kids. They kept my talented brother and sent me to live with my uncle, like I was just an extra burden. 10 years later, we reunited at my grandmother's 75th birthday, and their expressions were priceless when they saw me in a state they never expected. Back when I was just a teenager, my family experienced a devastating loss when my dad, who at the time was a successful businessman, started facing enormous financial troubles. At one point, his business partner even ran away with some of the company's funds, making it impossible for my dad to keep the business afloat any longer. In the end, he was forced to shut down the business completely. My father had always been a very proud man and took immense pride in his business. However, when he suddenly lost his only source of income, it made him absolutely depressed. He had always been a pillar of strength for our family, the one we all looked up to, not just for his hard work and dedication, but for the way he carried himself with dignity and grace in everything he did. His business wasn't just a source of income. It was a reflection of his dreams, his aspirations, and all the years of effort he had invested. When it crumbled, it felt like more than just a financial loss. It was as if a part of him had been taken away. For our family, this loss was not just about the money or the business itself. It was about the uncertainty that followed. Watching my father transform from the cheerful, happy man I had always known into someone who was short-tempered and constantly agitated was one of the most painful experiences of my life. It was as if the weight of his loss had drained him of the very qualities that had defined him for so long. I vividly remember those dark days when he would spend entire days in bed. A stark contrast to the energetic man he used to be. He would only come out to eat, and even then it was a quick, almost mechanical routine before he retreated back to the solitude of his bed. He seemed to have lost all interest in life outside of his room. My mom would try her best to lift his spirits. She would gently urge him to get out of bed, suggesting that he find some hobbies or even just go for a walk to clear his mind. She hoped that maybe a distraction could help pull him out of the deep sadness he was sinking into. But instead of the hopeful response she was looking for, my dad would often snap at her, telling her to leave him alone. The frustration and pain in his voice were palpable, and it was clear that he was grappling with emotions he didn't know how to handle. During this difficult time, my mom became the sole provider for our family. She was a nurse at a local hospital, and while she had always been committed to her work, the financial strain of my dad's business collapse meant that she had to take on even more. The bills were piling up, and the rent was overdue. There was no choice. She had to pick up extra shifts at the hospital, often working long hours just to keep us afloat. It was hard to see her stretch herself so thin, juggling the demands of her job while also trying to hold our family together emotionally. She never complained, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes and the weight on her shoulders. She was carrying so much, and I admired her strength, even as I worried about how long she could keep it up. The atmosphere at home during that time was always heavy, thick with an unspoken tension that lingered in every corner of the house. My younger brother, Michael, and I did our best to avoid anything that might anger our parents, especially our dad, whose mood had become so unpredictable. Now, Michael was always the smarter one between the two of us, the kind of kid who was naturally gifted. When it came to academics, he was a bit of a nerd, the type who loved burying his nose in books and solving complex problems for fun. In contrast, while I did well in school, my interests extended beyond just studying. I was passionate about basketball and had a few other hobbies that I enjoyed, which meant my grades weren't quite on Michael's level. But I always did my best. And up until that point, my mom had never had any issues with it. Since she regularly kept track of my grades, she understood that we were different and valued the effort we each put into our pursuits. However, as my dad began spending more and more time at home, the dynamics in our family began to change. He suddenly had a newfound interest in our grades and would make comments about how I clearly wasn't working as hard as Michael, pointing out the differences in our academic achievements. I remember him saying things like, "If you're not going to be the best, then what's the point of even studying? Stop going to school." His words hurt a lot. Not just because they were mean, but because they clearly came from his own pain and failure after the loss of his business. It was as if he was projecting his feelings of inadequacy and loss onto me. It hurt to see him so disillusioned and to feel like I was somehow contributing to his unhappiness, even though I knew deep down that wasn't the case. I tried to focus on my studies more, hoping to impress my dad, but it was just never enough. If my mom ever showed any appreciation for my grades, my dad would quickly undermine it with taunts, insisting that there was nothing to be proud of when the grades could be much better. At first, my mom would try to defend me, reminding him that I was doing my best and that every achievement, no matter how small, deserved recognition. But as time went on, and as my dad's taunts grew more frequent and intense, something changed. Slowly, she started to join in with him, echoing his comparisons between me and Michael. They both began to tell me almost daily how much better my younger brother was doing than me, and how I needed to step it up if I wanted to keep up with him in life. My dad would remind me almost every day how I was always lesser than Michael. The comparisons felt relentless, and they started to seep into every aspect of my life. Eventually, they even banned me from any after-school activities, including playing basketball. They told me that if I wanted to do better in school, I needed. Now comment update to tag you on part 2.